The stuff that I'm going to cover today includes billing customers. So all those financial documents that you generate at the end of closing a deal, things like creating estimates, creating invoices, sales orders, how you deal with shipping items, and then how you deal with delivering services and stuff like that. I will be doing some live demos of the products, and at the end we can do an open Q&A. So if at any time you can't hear my voice or you're having issues seeing things, just go ahead and send me a question and let me know, and I'll check that periodically to make sure nothing is going wrong. Okay, I think with that then I am ready to get started. So there's four main applications that I'm going to be talking about in this webinar. There's Zoho Books, which is a double entry accounting system, which is the heart of the finance suite included inside Zoho One. Then there's also Zoho CRM, which is our customer relationship management tool. That's the database of all of your customers and all their information. I'll also be touching on Zoho Inventory, which is kind of like an add-on to Zoho Books. So basically, Zoho Books and Zoho Inventory are built on the same database, which is going to be kind of an important thing to know. So what that means is if you're doing things like generating sales orders or dealing with packages and shipping items, mostly you'll be working through Zoho Inventory to do stuff like that. But what's important to know is that any information that you enter into inventory just automatically will show up in Zoho Books. You don't have to wait for that to sync over or anything. Now, not everything in Zoho One is built on one database. So all of the finance apps are one database, but that database is separate from the CRM. So sometimes there are actions where you'll have to wait for something to sync from the CRM to the accounting software or vice versa. So that's just something kind of important to know to understand how Zoho One is set up. So Zoho Inventory is really just sort of like an add-on. It gives you extra functionality when it comes to managing orders. And then I'll also talk a bit about Zoho Projects. So if you're a service-based company and you're doing large, complicated projects where you need to really keep track of who's doing what and what your timeline is, then Zoho Projects is the tool for you. So I'll be kind of giving you an overview of some of these tools, but mostly what I'm going to be talking about is all the stuff that happens kind of right at the time you close a deal to the point of delivering items or delivering services to your client. Okay, so just to make sure that we're all on the same page, I just want to briefly run through some definitions of some of the things that I'm going to be talking about. So on the receivables side in finance, we have a bunch of different ways to keep records of receivables and manage that process. So receivables, just money coming into the company. In Zoho, we call quotes estimates. So you'll be hearing me refer to quotes as estimates throughout this webinar. That's just the name we chose. I don't think there's any really big reason for that. So an estimate is just a proposal of all of the goods or services that you're going to offer your customer. So usually you're using an estimate / quote when you're trying to close a deal. Then we have sales orders. So a sales order is a list of all of the goods in one deal. And sales orders are really best for when you need to deliver things in installments. So if somebody orders a whole bunch of things, you may not be able to ship all of that to them at once. And so that's when you can use a sales order as kind of like your master record of all of the things that you're supposed to give to that customer, and then have multiple invoices attached to that sales order or associated with it. And you could just have one invoice for each shipment that you're giving them. You could also use these for services if you wanted to break down your services that way, but that's just not really a common way to deal with it. So generally, you're only going to need to think about sales orders if you're a company that is dealing with large orders of items. Then we have invoices. So invoices are actual financial documents which show what a customer owes you. Like I was just saying, you can have several invoices for one sales order. And then we have other types of ways to deal with receivables. This is not a comprehensive list on the slide, but one example is the retainer invoice, which I'll touch on a little bit later on, which is basically an advance payment. So if you want to have somebody pay like a percentage of the project cost up front before you even begin doing stuff for them, you could use a retainer invoice for something like that. And so a retainer invoice in the finance world represents a liability because it's somebody paying you for something which has not yet been rendered, so a good or service which you have not yet delivered. Just something to note, we also deal with the payables side. So Zoho Books is a full double entry accounting system, so we deal with receivables and payables. And on the payable side, which is just money going out of your company towards vendors or expenses or whatever it is that you're spending money on, basically all of the documents you deal with there are inverses of something that exists on the receivables side. So the opposite of a sales order is a purchase order, which is just a list of all the things that you are buying. So it gives you a record of what you have paid for or what you are supposed to get. A bill is like the opposite of an invoice. And so this is the one part that's kind of important, just because the way we use this word in everyday parlance is a little bit different than how it might be used here. So whenever I talk about billing, that just means you paying bills, your company owing money. If I talk about invoicing, then we're talking about your clients paying you money. Just want to make sure that's clear. So it shows what you owe a vendor. You can have several for one purchase order. And then, another example of a payable is just like an expense, which is, pretty similar, except it's like a record of something that you've already paid for. Okay, so going back to our receivables side, there is more than one way to send an estimate. So, the first way I want to explain this is that you can send estimates from Zoho CRM or from Zoho Books if you're a Zoho One customer. And so something that's important to know is that Zoho CRM, when you first set it up, has a whole bunch of finance modules built into it. Like there's one that's actually called quotes. There's, I think, sales orders and invoices and a bunch of stuff like that. If you're a Zoho One customer, though, usually what you can do is you can turn off those CRM modules and then use instead the integration with Zoho Books. And so you'll replace those CRM modules with the information that you're keeping in Zoho Books. And so the reason that we have that kind of confusing setup there is just because CRM is also sold as a standalone application. And so by default, it comes with its own quoting thing, but that's just not as robust as if you're using Zoho Books, which is a tool meant specifically for finance and accounting. So when you're a Zoho One customer, what you'll want to do is you'll go into the settings, and I have a slide about this towards the end of my presentation. You'll go into the settings, and basically you'll turn on the integration between CRM and Books. You'll choose any options of how you want to configure that. And then at that time, when you turn on the integration here, it'll give you a choice to say, I want to keep my CRM modules because maybe I already have important data in there, or I haven't been using those. So you can just go ahead and hide them, and I don't need to deal with them. So that's one important thing to know. And basically the reason I'm talking about this is because different companies have different ways of dealing with this process. So if you want to have your sales rep be the person who sends out a quote or an estimate, you can do that, and you would have them work out of the CRM. Or you could have it done by your back office people or your accountant. So at most companies, it seems the way things are going on, usually it's the sales rep who's dealing with the estimate, and then it's the accountant who is touching the invoice. But we'll talk about that more when I demo this later on. So the other thing I mean by more than one way to send an estimate is that there's a few different ways to have your customers view and accept those estimates. So typically when you send out that estimate, what's happening is you're sending it out over email. It'll be attached as a PDF. It can also be a link. So you can send both a PDF and a link that they could view online in the same email. There's a few different ways you can do this. So one is verbal acceptance. So that just means you send somebody an estimate and then maybe you call them up and you say, okay, does that look good? And then you just verbally take, okay, yeah, they have accepted it, and you manually mark that as accepted in the system. A little bit more advanced is to send the public link, which comes with an accept button. So if you do that, the beauty of this is that you don't have to do as much manual follow-up to find out if the customer likes what you're offering them. Basically, they can just open the link to the estimate in their email. They will have a big blue accept button. If they hit that, then you'll get an update letting you know that they've accepted it. And then finally, the most advanced way to deal with estimates is to have the customer portal in Zoho Books set up. And if you do this, this also enables e-signing. So the way the customer portal works is basically Zoho Books generates like an online portal where each different customer can have their own login. And when they log into that, they can see all of their estimates, invoices, a complete history of their financial transactions with you, and they can just download all of those things. They can accept things, they can pay stuff off through there. There's a couple benefits to doing it this way. So one is that besides just getting a notification once the estimate has been accepted, if you're using the portal, you can also have a record of the first time somebody viewed an estimate. And you can also get a notification about that. So you can see, oh, somebody, looked at their estimate this morning, but they haven't said anything yet. So maybe I'll give them a call today. So that's something you can do. Another thing is this enables the Zoho Sign integration. So Zoho Sign comes with your Zoho One bundle, and so Zoho Sign allows them to digitally sign the estimate. So if you have terms and conditions on there and you want to collect a legally valid e-signature right on the estimate, then it makes that process a lot simpler. So I have screenshots to show each one of these examples. So if somebody verbally accepts an estimate, you would just go into your system, look up their estimate, and then use this drop down to mark it as accepted. If you send out that public link, this is what it's going to look like when somebody clicks the link from their email. So it'll open up in a new page. They'll be able to see the full estimate. You'll notice this looks a lot like a portal. Like over on the left side, we have things like estimates, invoices, statements. But you'll also notice in the upper right corner, there's this login here button. So this link will only show them that particular estimate. If they want to be able to see all the other things you've sent to them, you would have to have both enabled the portal and they would have to then also know how to log in and what their password is. So there's the big blue accept button I was talking about. And then this is the last method. So if you are using that portal, when somebody logs in, they will have this basically this little window that pops up when they hit accept, where they have to add in their signature. And this is a legally valid way to collect the digital signature. And then their signature gets saved onto the PDF in your system. So when you have all your records of all the things you sold or all the estimates that were accepted, you'll have all those signatures on there. So that can be pretty useful for compliance purposes too. So one thing to note is that the way that the integration between Sign and Books works right now is that if you enable that e-signing option, then it's going to disable the ability for somebody to accept something through the public link. So what that means is if you want to use the e-signing process for just some of your customers and then have others do like a simpler version where they just hit the accept button, it's not really going to work. So that basically means if you're using e-signing, then somebody can either e-sign or you can manually mark it as accepted, but you can't have them just click a button and mark it that way. Okay, so there's also more than one way to invoice a customer. So this diagram kind of shows you some of the main ways the different types of businesses might want to deal with invoicing. So typically the first step is always going to be sending out an estimate. Of course, that too is optional. You don't really have to do that. You can just go straight to an invoice if you wanted. But once that estimate gets accepted, there's different things you can do with it. So the simplest version is that you can just convert it straight into an invoice and then, ask the customer for money right then, right? Another option, you can convert it into recurring invoices. So you would use that option if you just want to have somebody pay you in installments, or maybe if they're paying for like a simple subscription, you could do it that way. You could also convert into a sales order. So if it's a really, really big order, there's lots of items on it, you might do that and then have multiple invoices off of that sales order. And then the last option, and this again is not even a comprehensive list of the different ways you can do this, is to maybe start with a retainer invoice. So once they accept it, they pay a retainer fee, and then you only invoice them if they actually end up using your services, or based off of the amount of time that you end up billing them for, or invoicing them for, I should say. Okay, so for the next phase of this webinar, I'm just going to explain how you would run some of these core examples for different types of businesses, and I will be demoing the software live. So if you're a company that delivers items to your customers, then this is what a process might look like for you. And I've also color-coded these diagrams based off of where you would do each thing. So the first few steps, like sending the estimate and converting it to a sales order, you would probably just have your salesperson do, and that can be done from Zoho CRM. And then these parts in green, you would probably be doing from your back office. It would be done in the warehouse using Zoho Inventory, or your accountant would be dealing with it for like the invoicing stuff. So if we're delivering items to somebody, let's just take a look at how that might look in the software. So I'm switching windows over here, and I am opening up the Zoho CRM. I'm in the contacts section of Zoho CRM, which is where you would be storing your customers if they were like individuals. For a lot of businesses, if you're doing B2B, you would be, I guess ultimately your customers would be accounts or businesses that you're doing business with, but you would still be using the contacts module to keep track of all of the people at those businesses who you are selling your goods or services to. So I'm over here in contacts, and I'll open up this customer, Jesse Itemberg, who just loves items, and we have a deal with him to sell a whole lot of items. So let's take a look at that. So I'll open up his deal, and we can see all of the deal stages across the top of the screen here. We can see basically if we scroll down, okay, we have an amount, so it's for $6,000. That's what we think we can sell this guy on. And one of the cool things that you can do with this CRM Books integration is that I can set it up so that way I could have like a deal stage. Like right here, I created one that says create estimate. And if I change the stage of my deal to where it's far enough along that I go, okay, I know I need to send this guy an estimate now, and so I'll update my deal stage to that, I could actually auto-generate an estimate once I change it to that deal stage. So this is just an option that you have. You don't have to set it up to auto-generate. You might not want that. That's just good to know. So over on the left side here, we have all of these related lists where we can get extra information about this deal. So if I come in and I click on Zoho Finance, this is something that will only show up once you've turned on that CRM and finance integration in your settings. So when I click on that, the draft estimate is already sitting here. And so this is what got auto-generated from me updating that deal stage. So I'll click on this, and it'll take a moment, and it opens up the estimate right inside CRM here. So one cool thing about our system is that what you see in the CRM and in Zoho Books and what your customer sees always looks consistent. It always looks exactly the same. So if your customer has questions about, why is this thing on my estimate, or why does my estimate look like this, you should be able to see exactly what they are looking at. Okay, so you'll notice here in the item breakdown for this estimate, it just says a lot of items. And so that whatever the name of my deal is what gets automatically put in there if I'm using that setting to auto generate the estimate. But I can always come in and I can edit this as the salesperson. And so, I don't have to keep that. I could actually specify what these items are. And so I can delete it, and then I can see all of the different items that we have in stock here. So for instance, this Apple computer, when I hover over it, I can see stock on hand, 197 pieces. So it's telling me as I'm adding items onto the estimate, not only what do we have in our system, which I can type and search through, so I can search like Apple or computer and it will filter it down, but it's also telling me, do we actually have this stuff in stock? So that's useful to know as a salesperson, whether you're selling something that's on back order or whether you need to notify somebody that something is running low on stock. So, I can say they're getting 10 of these and 5 of these, and maybe they're getting some printer stuff. Let's just add in a few printers. Great. And so it's automatically calculating subtotal for each line. So up here, I can put in an expiration date. So if I tell them, oh, this deal is only good until next Friday, I can put a record of that in the system, and then the estimate, they won't be able to accept it after that date. And then I can go, oh no, turns out my special offer has expired. I guess you should have acted faster. Price lists. So I can create different price lists in my system that will affect the price of various items. So this one, just as an example, is like a 5% markdown across the board. So maybe if you have like certain top clients who can access a discount rate, you could do something like that. Another way people use the price lists is, let's say you have customers in different countries, and so you may be adjusting the price based on the currency that they're paying in. You can use price lists to convert into like your euro or your peso or whatever type of currency you want to switch it into. Okay, so I've added some items on here. I can also do a discount if I want to. So this can either be flat or it can be percentage based. I can add on notes to the estimate, which will actually show up when the customer is viewing it. So I can say like, because I like you, I'll give you, or I gave you a great deal, right? And then I can give them like $1 off. And so another thing to notice here when I'm creating the estimate is we have this terms and conditions box. And so this is just a default thing that I can set up for my company, but also we can adjust this on a case-by-case basis. So I could put in separate terms and conditions based on who the customer is or what they're buying. Okay, and then when I want to send it out, I want to make sure I have this box checked for which person I'm sending it to, and then I just hit save and send. And so it updates the changes I made on the estimate, and then it's showing me the email which will be sent out. So this is just a template email. So it'll have both an attached PDF and a link where they can view it online. I'll go ahead and send that out. Okay, great. So now this little ribbon up in the top left corner shows me that the estimate has been sent. If I wanted to come down here and take some notes on, maybe something the customer told me, I could do that. I could also add in activities. So I could create a follow-up task for myself that is associated with this estimate. So that way I can have a reminder to go in and follow up and say, hey, you didn't respond, or hey, you didn't pay us, or whatever it is. But let's just kind of jump ahead to the next step. So here we've sent out the estimate from CRM. Now the customer would accept it. So I'm just going to assume maybe they've accepted verbally. And so I can just come in here as the salesperson and I could hit convert. And then I could choose sales order right then. And it'll actually give me a message here that says the estimate has to be accepted before it can be converted. So it's kind of like idiot proofing it. One thing that's a little weird right now, which they're working on fixing, is that even though it's already been sent, until I refresh the page, it still just shows me this mark as sent option. So I have to click that before I can then mark it as accepted. So that's just something to note. It should be fixed before too long though. So I'll mark it as accepted. Great. So now we have that updated in our system, and now it'll let me convert it into a sales order or an invoice. So I'll do a sales order. And when I do this, it automatically adds in all the stuff that was already there. So there's not really much that has to be done on this. Maybe if I was making some changes, I might add on a price list at this point. But probably I would just save this and send it out with no changes made. And it'll show me that template email, and I could send it out. And I could also write a message into that email, so I can change the template email before it gets sent out if I want to include a personal message as well. Great, so now we have our invoice, we have our estimate, we have our sales order. And if we go back to this deal and we click on that Zoho Finance related list now, we can see that we have an estimate in here. The status is accepted. We have a sales order. Status is open. We can see the date both of those things happened. And we also could see there's no invoices created yet. So if we look back over at our diagram, we've sent an estimate. It's been accepted. We've converted it to the sales order. So if we're a salesperson, our job is kind of done now. And this is where things would probably pass off to the back office, where somebody would pick up from here in Zoho Books or Zoho Inventory to deal with the packing and the shipping. So let's take a look at that step of the process next. Okay. All right, so switching back over, I'm going to go to another tab, and this is where I have Zoho Inventory open. So in Inventory, this is the dashboard. I can at a glance see how many items need to be packed, how many items need to be shipped, delivered, invoiced. I can see what my top selling items are. It's just giving me some key information to look at. If I take a look in the items section in Inventory, these are all of the things that we have that in stock, all the items that we sell. And it's telling me the amount of stock on hand and a reorder level. So I can set a level where automatically, if it goes below a certain amount, it'll notify me that I should probably order more. And I can put in multiple images of each product. I can enter in all kinds of extra information about them. And then one cool thing is that I can also take a look at transactions for each type of product. So I could see, all right, I want to look at this particular computer. How many people have bought this, or what's the history with just this item? And I can see all the different things that have happened, all the people that have sold, we've sold it to, all of the returns, et cetera, et cetera. So inventory also lets you kind of group things a little bit differently. So you can do like item groups. So if you're like selling a shirt that comes in multiple sizes and colors, but it is ultimately one type of shirt, then you can create a group and account for that. You can do composite items. So if you're selling, for example, an outfit that comes with a shirt, a pair of pants, and a belt, each time you sell that full outfit, there's 3 separate items that need to have their inventory count updated. You can do things like that. And then you can also keep track of how much you have on hand in each warehouse. and where your items are basically. Okay, so if I come over to sales orders, we can see there's a new sales order. This is the one that I just created. And these other ones, we can see a status of whether they have been invoiced, partially invoiced, paid, partially paid, packed, partially packed. So at a glance, we can see what's going on. There's also a packages section. So in here, we can see roughly, how many things need to be packed, shipped, how many have been delivered. So we can get an idea at a glance of how busy we are, and then just open up individual records and just get going on whatever the next thing we need to do is. So let's open up this sales order. So this shows me the items that have been ordered by Jesse, and we can see for each item how many have been packed and how many have been invoiced. So one cool thing is up at the top, it tells me what I probably am supposed to do next. So it's telling me fulfill the sales order and gives me 2 buttons. I can create a package or convert to an invoice if I'm ready to invoice the customer for it. So we'll create a package, and let's say we're just sending out just these computers are being sent out first. The other things are not ready to go yet, so I can just get rid of those. If you wanted to do this the opposite way, where let's say, I have a sales order that has hundreds of different items or dozens of different items, and rather than delete all of the ones that I'm not sending, just start with a blank one and then only add on the things, then I can also do it that way too. And so I just have to click this little thing and just say, okay, I'm just sending out these computers today. And then I can even enter in like how many am I actually sending? Is it all 5 of those? 4 of them or whatever. So I will create the package, I'll hit save. And one important thing to note about the packing slip in Zoho Inventory is that it's really just a record of what went into each package that you sent out. So it tells me who to bill to, who to ship to. It tells me what I put into it, but it is not telling me where do I find these computers in my warehouse. So that's one feature that is missing from Zoho Inventory that the team is working on. So if you want to be able to create a packing slip that tells me, okay, I need to go to, this warehouse and this row and this bin to find exactly what I'm looking for, that's just a feature that we don't have available right now. Okay, so I've created a record of the package and now it says not shipped. So then when I'm ready to ship this out, I have 2 options. I can ship it manually. And if I choose this option, that would be like if I went down to my local FedEx and they gave me a tracking number, yada, yada, yada. Or I could do ship via carrier. So if I have integrated with a shipping carrier, of which we provide dozens of different options, then we can automate this process a little bit more. So I'd say FedEx, that's the only one I've connected with this demo account so far. It automatically knows my address. It has the destination address for the customer, which I would probably need to verify. It's going to say unable because I just put in like a random fake address in there. But I would hit continue if I was actually doing this. I'd say what my package weighs, what type of thing I am sending. And then what's cool is I could hit get rates, and then FedEx, if it was able to verify the address, if it was a real address, it would tell me how much they're going to charge me for that. And then in the last step, I could generate the label straight from Zoho Inventory and then save a record of that and print that out if I wanted to. So that's all super convenient and nice. And it's really one of the best things about inventory, but it's just hard to demo because I don't have like a lot of real accounts with these partners that we have. But if you're shipping it manually, same idea except it's just going to be more manual work. You'd have to manually enter in what your tracking number is. You'd have to manually enter in your shipping charges, do all that stuff. So I can save the package, great. So now it's been marked as shipped in the system. It saves the date of the shipment. Fantastic. So if I came down here to the packages area, we could see, here we go, that's the package I just created. So it's in the shipped packages zone. It has 5 items in it. And then I could just click on that to open this back up. And then let's say, it gets delivered. I can manually mark it as delivered. And then I can choose whether to automatically notify my customer, hey, it made it there on time. So if I hadn't done this all manually, FedEx would probably email me and say, we delivered your thing. And then I could update it on my end and then automatically push out my own template email to the customer, letting them know their package should be there. So now it's marked as delivered. If I wanted to make that a lot more automated, there's a integration that I could use. So if I went into the settings in Zoho Inventory, I went to integrations, we have this after ship integration, which is very nice, which allows you to send automated shipment notifications throughout the entire process to your customers. So you connect in your after ship account, you can notify them when it's sent, when it's on its way, you can notify them when it gets there, do all of that stuff automatically. So that's a pretty nice integration to know about. And then just to show you the shipping channels, we have a whole bunch of different options of different types of shipping channels that you can integrate into your inventory account. Okay, so let's go back out of that and return to our package. So our package has been delivered, which means it is now time for us to try and invoice our customer for that. So if we come back over to our sales order, we will see partially packed. That's what shows up. So we've shipped it out. Last step in this is just going to be creating that invoice. So what I can do is I can open up the sales order. I can hit convert to invoice. And then I can just say, all right, it's just these 5 computers that we sent. That's what I'm going to invoice for. I could set terms. So is it due right away or is it due in 30 days? However I want to deal with that. And then, I could save this and send it out. So one thing to note is when you're sending out invoices, there's multiple options that you could enable or not enable for how you want to get paid. So the way that payment processing works with the Zoho Finance apps is you integrate in a payment processor. So these are companies like WePay, Stripe, PayPal. There's an ACH 1 or 2, I think, that we integrate with. And so once you've integrated with those, then you can actually, process credit card information or take ACH payments in a much more automated way. And so if I had those connected to this demo account, then I'd be able to say exactly which ones I want to enable for this particular invoice if I wanted to. But I'll save that and send it out. Shows me the template message. I think we kind of get the idea there. And then it's marked as sent. And then when they, use their customer portal and then go and pay us, that would all get marked as paid automatically. Or otherwise, I could hit record payment. I could say how they paid me. Maybe they sent me a check, and then record that into the system. So now when I look at the sales order out here, it still just shows it as partially packed. I think it takes a second sometimes to update. There we go. Now it says partially invoiced, partially paid, partially packed, because we've only sent them part of the thing. And if we open it up, we can get more detail about what exactly has been done so far on this order. So we can see exactly which items were packed, shipped, and invoiced. And then, we would pretty much just rinse and repeat that process until we fulfilled the entire thing. So I'm going to switch back over to Zoho CRM now, and I could refresh this. And so the Zoho Finance section now shows, partially invoiced. It shows we have 1 paid invoice in here. I could take a look at any of that as the sales rep. But another cool thing is that when I'm looking at this customer, there's this little section that is called finance details over at the top. So over here, I could see ordered items. So lifetime for this customer, how many things need to be packed, shipped, invoiced. I could see what shipments are in progress right now. I can also see total receivables and payables. So this is how much we've sold them. This is how much they still need to pay in invoices. And then if we had some store credit that we had recorded for this customer because maybe they returned something, that would also show up here as unused credits. So as a salesperson, it would be useful to know, oh, okay, I shouldn't try and sell this person a bunch more stuff because they haven't even paid us for the last thing. Or it might be useful to see, oh, they actually have a lot of credit with us. I could probably make an easy sale since it's not going to be as expensive for them. Also, it's just useful to know if you're the point of contact for this customer, you can very quickly check up on their shipments and what's going on with that. All right, so that's how you would deliver items in a nutshell. Real quickly, let's take a look at what you would do if you were doing time-based services. So if you're like a law firm where you're like billing people by the hour, or just any kind of company where you're actually doing like hourly based billing, we'll take a look at one way that you can do that I think is probably the recommended way to do it if you ask me. So the first thing we would do is we would probably send out an estimate and get the customer to accept it through the CRM. But then what we could do is we can set up a project in Zoho Books, record our time, and we could even create a recurring invoice to automatically add all those timesheets and periodically send it out. So I'm switching back over to the apps, and now I'm going to open Zoho Books. So this is the double entry accounting software I've been talking about. You'll notice it looks very similar to Zoho Inventory. And actually, if you want to, you can set it up so basically all of the inventory modules just show up in Books. Then you don't really have to use inventory because all of its power will just be sitting in this screen instead if you wanted to. So I'm over here in Zoho Books. Probably what I would do for a situation like this is I would go down to the time tracking and I'd hit projects and I would just create a new project. Let's just choose a random customer. So I'll choose Curtis Co. and I'll say hourly work for Curtis. I don't know, whatever I want to name my project. Then I would choose a billing method. So here there's four options I can pick from. So one is a fixed cost for the project, pretty straightforward. Then there's project hours. So if I just have like one rate that I'm always going to charge them for any work that's done. Or if I want to get really specific, I could do task or even staff hours. So I could have different rates for different people or even different rates based off of what kind of work I'm doing for this person. I'll just do project hours for now, keep it kind of simple. And let's say we charge $50 an hour for our projects. I could add in tasks if I wanted to. So I could say doing stuff for you. That could be one of the tasks. I could add multiple different options if I wanted to, like doing high value stuff could be another option, right? I don't know, whatever those things are. And then what's cool about the tasks is that I can check billable or unbillable. So I can use this to track time that I don't necessarily want to show the customer, but I just want to use for my own purposes of like, where am I spending a lot of time? I could track that as unbillable stuff just for reporting purposes and then figure out, okay, well, certain types of projects just aren't worth my time because it takes too long to do it. So once I create that project, then I can log time for it. So whenever I want to log time, I would just say, what project am I working on? What task am I doing? I can say how much time I spent. So you can enter this a bunch of different ways. Like if I do it this way, that's like 5 hours, or I could just put in 5 and it'll do the same thing. Or I could do 5.5 and it converts it to 5.5 hours correctly. And then I could save that. Another way to log time is I could click start timer here. And so when I do that, it'll just start counting up. You can see this little clock thing. And then when I'm done, I just hit stop. And so that's another way to keep track of all that. And then when I'm ready to bill them, the simplest way to do it is I would just hit new transaction, create invoice. And then when I do this, it shows me a few options for how I want to configure the invoice. And basically it's like, how detailed do I want to get? So first I choose a date that I want to bill up to. So I could say, oh yeah, I'm just gonna bill you for everything up until last week, or I can say bill for everything up until the present, and it'll automatically just pull in all of the timesheet hours that I've submitted for this one. Then I can say, single line, so I can just say, one line of like what I did, and it could just be, yeah, it was this project, and I could put in the project description if I wanted to. Or if I wanted to be more transparent, then I could say, let's group it by tasks, and then I will show the task name of every single different type of task I did and how many hours were spent on it. And so it gives me a bunch of different ways to do this, to control how much information I do or don't want to give. I'll just show the simple one. One thing nice about this is that we can quickly attach any expenses or bills that are associated with this project onto the invoice as well. So if I had, some time that I'm billing hourly for just from my own company, but then I also had like a contractor or something, then what I could do is I could add in all the money I paid that contractor working on this project as an expense that's associated to it, and then include any unbilled expenses when I'm ready to invoice the customer, and it'll send out that invoice with all of the money that they also owe for the contract work that was a part of this. So I could send all that out, and creates the invoice screen. I think we've seen this. We kind of get the point of how this works, but that's how you can do like an hourly based delivery situation. So the last part that I want to demo before we get into the Q&A and some links where you can learn even more about all this stuff is project-based services. And so by project-based, I just mean like you're dealing with a project that is big enough and complicated enough that most likely you aren't going to be really billing someone by the hours of what everyone has spent on the project. More likely than not, you would just say, all right, I can do this big project for you. Maybe it's like a big construction project and it's going to cost you $200K. And so you pay 20% up front, and then you just keep paying me, 20% at a time until I'm done with the project maybe. So I'm going to talk a lot about Zoho Projects here. I'll give you kind of just an overview of what that application is like, and then sort of explain how you could do this project-based billing that comes in installments. Okay, so I'll switch back over to Zoho CRM just for a moment. So let's go back into the contacts where all our customers live. Let's take a look at a different customer named Jesse Projectberg, who just loves projects. He's all about projects. And we've got a deal for him. It's a big business deal. And, if I was ready to start a project for this guy, probably what I would do is I'd send out an estimate. I'd say, yeah, this project, I'm just going to charge you a flat fee of 10K. You either like it or you don't. And then when he accepts that, what I would do is I'd come down to this Zoho Projects related list over on the left side, and I would start a new project for him. And this is where I could put in the basic information about the project. So if I was the kind of company doing this, I would almost certainly be using project templates where I could have like certain types of like set rate projects that we do for people. and those templates have, a certain set amount of a time, like a timeline that they're gonna take place in, and maybe they have like a set rate. And we also could set up a bunch of tasks that we know go into those projects. So in this example, I'm gonna be like an IT services company where I have a, a template project for deploying IT services in an office. So I already set that up. And so once you've set it up, the project will show up like this when you're looking at it from the CRM, where basically there's these 3 bars where you can get roughly an idea of how well things are going. So if you're the salesperson and your client keeps asking you, hey, what's going on? When will this be done? What's happening? You can take a look at the milestones bar to see like broadly how many major milestones in the project are left. So right now this means, because there's a 3 on the right and this bar is all gray, that means all 3 milestones have not been completed. And then we can see how many tasks in the project are finished versus open. So here 1 has been done, so we see a little bit of green, 19 are left open. And then if I really wanted to dive into this, I could click on it and open it, and it basically just loads up Zoho Projects inside Zoho CRM, where I could then dive in and see exactly what are the overdue things, who is responsible for them. I could dive into like the feed of what everybody is talking about on this project. I could take a look at their calendar. I could get all kinds of information in here if I wanted to. So rather than look at this inside Zoho CRM, which is kind of insane, I'm just going to switch over to Zoho Projects, because probably if you were like a project manager or someone like that, you would be looking at it in here anyways. So Zoho Projects is a waterfall style project management application. And so what that means is it's organized kind of in like this pyramid of like increasing detail. So, we have a project. That project is broken into like chapters or milestones, which are like the major things we need to get done. Each milestone is broken into 1 or more task lists, and each task list has like a set of tasks that individual people are responsible for. So basically it allows you to take like a big project with lots of moving pieces and lots of people working on it, kind of break it down and get a sense of like, from the milestone view, which is like the bird's eye view, how well is this going? How close are we to completion? And then at a really detailed view, who is responsible for what? When is each thing going to happen? So I'll come over here, switch back into projects just to show you kind of what this looks like. So this is the tasks view over here. Each one of these is a task list with multiple tasks inside it. And then there's also milestones. So these are just like the broad pieces of the project, and then what percentage completion we can kind of see over there. And then if I want to get really detailed, I can open up like a particular task like this one. So, if we were doing some office IT deployment where we have to lay a bunch of wire, we might break this into 3 tasks because we can't lay wire in the back part until we've done the front part, for instance, because each one is dependent on the other. So you can set up task dependencies. So we can see here, there's like a connection between these. And if one takes longer all of a sudden, let's say this gets pushed back, then the other task will also move in the timeline. And so this is the real core value of Zoho Projects, is that you can set up these task dependencies, and then if things finish early or things finish late, you can automatically readjust your project schedule based off of what's happening. So you can set up different dependencies. You can keep you can keep everything on schedule and get an idea of whether you're running late or whether or also you can just kind of use this to figure out what are the things that need to happen first that are highest priority, because maybe a bunch of other tasks are dependent on them. So in this task view, there's other things I can do too, like I could leave comments in this. I could attach a document to it if I wanted to. I can also log hours for this particular task. So you'll see here, this looks pretty much just like in Zoho Books. I can put in the for, or I could do like a start and end time if I want to be really specific. I could log it for what hours in the day I actually did it for. And you'll notice it has that same billable, non-billable toggle in there as well. So, I'll just log 4 hours here. Why not? Great. And then, when I'm done with that task, I can mark it as closed. Fantastic. And all of these tasks can also be viewed on like a calendar view. So I just marked this laying the wire as complete, so that one shows up as crossed off. I could also filter my calendar to just not even show it if I wanted to. And then one of the things that people like the most about Zoho Projects is this ability to use the Gantt report. So the Gantt report basically just shows you all of the tasks laid out on a calendar, and it uses these arrows to show you the dependencies. So I can get a complete overview of everything happening in the project as a project manager, and I can also see what will happen, if one thing gets delayed or finishes early, and everything will get shifted automatically. I think that's kind of the main parts of Zoho Projects. I think you kind of get the core idea just from seeing all of that. So last thing to talk about with all of this is the finance section. So there's a few different ways you can deal with the billing for something like this. So one is I could come in here and I could create an invoice, and I could just check a box to add all of the unbilled expenses. And I could just make this like a really simple one where it's like a single line invoice. Actually, I'll show you how you would deal with contractors first. So if I wanted to have like contractors that I want to bill for, this is what I would do: is I'd add an expense for the contractor. I could just say contractor charge, it was $600, and I could save that. And I would want to actually mark this as billable, so it was marked as non-billable. Mark this as billable. And then when I go to invoice my customer, if I leave this include unbilled expenses, what will happen is all of the contractor amounts that I've added onto this as expenses will get added on, and I can send that out. And then, I could say if I wanted to make this just like, 20% of project completed, and that's what I want to put on my main bill, and then also invoice them for all of the contract work. I could do that, and then I could just say, yeah, so I'm going to charge you in installments of $2,000, and you have 30 days to pay it, and I can then send out my invoice through here. But another way to kind of deal with the billing is that you could actually do it through Zoho Books instead. So in Zoho Books, what I could do is I could create like a retainer invoice for my client, where basically I just say, 20% upfront fee, and then put in my amount. And then once they've paid off that retainer invoice, that will get applied to any other invoices that we send them in the future automatically. And so what we could do to sort of automate the billing, if we want to do it in installments, is set up a recurring invoice in Zoho Books. And so to do that, I don't remember the name of the customer. Well, we can just use Curtis Co. again. What I would do to create a recurring invoice is I would just choose a profile name, which just basically is a way of like grouping related invoices all together under one. So I could say the Curtis project. And then I can say how often I want to repeat it. So every week, every month, every 2 weeks. I can say when the invoice is due. Is it due right when they get it? Is it due within 15 days? And then I can say, 20% of project. And so basically what I could do is by setting up my end on date to be like several months from now and setting it to repeat every month, now I have a way of saying, okay, I'm going to do a project for you. It's going to last 4 months. You're going to pay me every month for another chunk of that fee, which I quoted you in my estimate. And so then what we could do is this will automatically send it out, and we can say, yeah, it'll be $2,000 every month. And the last step, which is kind of important to see, is whether we want to just create that invoice and then manually send it out. So if we want to make sure everything looks right before we send it out, we can set it to create and send automatically. Or if we have collected their credit card information using one of those payment gateways that we've connected into Zoho Books, then we could create, charge, and send the invoice. So if we have their information on file, this will just auto charge their account or their credit card or whatever it is. And so that's basically how you would probably be doing project billing. If you wanted to, you could go crazy enough to actually do the time tracking for every single task in your Zoho Projects project, and then actually send out an invoice for all of that using that finance thing I was showing you. But for most companies, I think it'll be much simpler to do time tracking for your own records, but then when it comes to invoicing your client, to just do it in installments like that, and maybe to set it up so it happens where they're paying 20% upfront and then they're just paying a percentage chunk at a time for the rest of the duration of the project after that. One thing I just wanted to say as a best practice is that when you're working from the Zoho CRM to generate your estimates or your contracts, it's always best to generate those financial documents from a deal rather than from a contact or an account. And the reason for that is because it just gives you more complete reporting. When you generate an estimate on a deal, then later on you'll be able to see not only which customer it's associated with, but which deal it's associated with. It's as simple as that. And so just something to keep in mind. And so what I mean by that is when you're in CRM and you're like looking at a deal or a contact, on that left-hand side where it says Zoho Finance, just want to make sure you're in the right module when you click New Estimate or New Sales Order. Because if I'm not doing it from here, then it's not going to know which deal to associate a particular estimate with. All right. Oh yeah, one other thing to point out here while I'm in the CRM, we'll notice, as that project updates, these continue to fill. So I closed a task earlier. Now we see that 2 are closed there, and 18 are left to do. Okay, so another thing, a lot of the stuff I showed you involves using the CRM finance integration. This is not necessarily turned on by default in your account. So you may have to go into your settings to set that up. If you want to do that, you can follow this link, zoho.to/crm-finance-int, and this will take you to a help document which explains all of the details that go into setting up that integration and how you want to turn it on. Also, when you are setting up this integration, I can just show you what it looks like real quickly by going into my CRM setup. When you are setting this up, down at the bottom, there's this option called CRM trigger points, which basically allows me to say at which deal stage should we auto create an estimate or auto accept an estimate, or we can switch it to invoices if we wanted to. This automation you can also just shut off by choosing none. So if you don't want to auto generate documents ever, that's also okay as well. But if you're looking for that feature, that's how you access that kind of automation. Now, that thing I was talking about earlier, where you have the option to shut off CRM's native, quoting and inventory modules, that also shows up when you are configuring this integration. So the options you choose here are going to be pretty important. I'd recommend checking out this help doc to make sure you do it right for the way your business is structured. All right, so I'm going to just run through some quick help links, and then we can go to Q&A. So if you want more information about which app should I get started with, how do I know which apps are going to be useful to me, you can schedule a call with the concierge team at Zoho by going to zoho.com/one/concierge. They're not a sales team. Basically, they'll just take your requirements into consideration and say, yeah, it sounds like for your business, you would want to use this, and you'd probably want to start by looking at these modules and turning X, Y, and Z on. So they're just kind of like a one-time consultant to help you get going with Zoho. There are other Zoho One webinars. So we have some overview-based webinars, which are basically slide deck based, but they tell you a lot about how Zoho One works and why it works the way it does. And then we have other sessions that are more demo focused, like this one. So there's a lead to cash one, which is more about how to use the CRM and how to deal with like invoicing in like a simple way, and then reconciling your invoices with bank transactions. And then we have another one about increasing website engagement, and there will be more of these coming in the future too. More events. So if you go to zoho.com/events, this is a super handy web page. So one, over on the left side, we list events all over the world and the country all the time. We're adding more. These are super helpful. You can meet Zoho people live. You can get training, lots more information, but we also have webinars over on the right side. So when you're using Zoho One, you have access to pretty much everything Zoho offers. And so, when you watch a Zoho One webinar, usually you're going to get overviews of applications. But if you really want to like dive deep into CRM or like, setting up Zoho Projects, something that's more like specific to a particular app, we have webinars for individual products as well, and those are super helpful. Okay, so other helpful links, if you go to our pricing page, you can see an explanation of the pricing. We have a resources page with more help docs. And then if you have more questions after this webinar, you think of things later on, you can always email webinars@zoho1.com. We'll do our best to get back to you with an answer.